Max Verstappen has evolved to become the best driver in Formula One, winning each of the last three championships. Beyond his natural talent, Verstappen's tenacious style of driving and winning mentality puts him way ahead of the competition. Usually, these are rare qualities that we only see from great and experienced drivers, but somehow Verstappen has displayed them since his debut season in 2015, where he shocked the entire F1 community with electrifying performances and daring overtakes. From the audacious maneuver on Felipe Nasr at the Belgian Grand Prix to his remarkable fourth place finishes in Hungary and the US, join us as we explore the crazy debut season of Max Verstappen in F1. Max Verstappen's path into Formula One is something out of a fairy tale movie. On the 11th of October 2013, he drove a racing car for the first time ever. Exactly 372 days later, he participated in his first ever Formula One practice. At 17 years and 3 days old, Verstappen became the youngest person to drive an F1 car in a competitive session. And despite driving an inferior car and suffering a mechanical failure, young Verstappen qualified in 12th place. It was a testament to his readiness to compete at the highest level and a sign of what was to come. A few months later, it was announced that the Dutch racer would drive for Toro Rosso in the 2015 season. For Verstappen, it was an unbelievable dream.
That was last week when we signed the deal. I couldn't believe it in the beginning.
Thankfully, the team stuck to its decision, and Verstappen would officially make his F1 debut at the 2015 Australian Grand Prix. Going into the race, the youngster qualified in 12th place, and as soon as the lights went out, he steered the car up the field to reach P6. Unfortunately, an engine issue forced him to retire on lap 34. Despite the disappointing end to the race, Verstappen was welcomed back to the garage by warm applause from fans and members of the team. In the post-race interview, Verstappen expressed his frustration, saying, "We were a bit unlucky. I think the first stint I had on the mediums was quite good. I could reasonably stay with the pack in front of me on softs, and behind me I didn't really have big pressure. Until the pit stop, everything was going really well. Unfortunately, I saw some smoke coming from the car and reported it to the pit wall, and they said to stop the car." The next weekend, Verstappen qualified in P6 and he made the most of that advantage to finish in 7th place. This meant the Dutchman became the youngest driver to score points in Formula One Championship. But the real story of the race was the stunning move he pulled on Daniel Ricciardo. Throttling fast and hard, Verstappen steered his STR10 around the outside of Ricciardo at turn 1. By the time they emerged at turn 2, both cars had entered a hairpin. But critically, Verstappen found himself in the inside line, which gave him the advantage going into the next turn, and once the opportunity presented itself, Max reacted quickly to drift past his more experienced rival. The boy who was considered too young to drive in F1 was now mixing it up with the big boys in just his second race. Quizzed about becoming the youngest point scorer in F1 history, Verstappen said, "For me, being the youngest doesn't really matter. I'm just really happy to have scored points. I'm happy to be 7th, and also happy to be in front of the Red Bulls. I think we did a great job as a team today." In the next event in China, Verstappen came out flying from the blocks like a turbocharged rocket ship. The young racer had qualified in P13, but after a few laps he was within touching distance of Sergio Perez, who was cruising in his Mercedes-powered Force India. With every turn, Verstappen was gaining pace on Perez, and eventually he got close enough to drift past the Force India driver. Max sustained this momentum, and he'd go on to pass Marcus Ericsson in turn 14. At this point, the entire grid had started to take note of Verstappen's fearless driving style and his knack for overtaking cars that are supposedly quicker than his. By lap 54, Max had gone all the way up to 8th position, and for the second consecutive race, he was looking to finish among the points. Then, all of a sudden, disaster struck. Similar to the incident in Australia, Verstappen's engine went up in flames, ultimately forcing him to quit the race. From contesting for points, the tenacious racer was now dealing with his second DNF in as many F1 races. But despite the disappointment, everyone seemed to agree that there was something really special about Verstappen. Fans couldn't wait to see him on the track again, and they got their wish at the Bahrain Grand Prix. The Bahrain International Circuit proved to be a difficult track for Verstappen. After qualifying in P15, Max started the race looking to make up for the lost time, but a very slow pit stop meant he emerged from the garage behind the rest of the grid in P20. Never one to give up without a fight, he pushed his car to the limit. However, the gap between him and the cars ahead was just too much, and to make things worse, an electrical issue forced him to retire in lap 34, in what would be his third mechanical DNF of his young racing career. After 2 consecutive DNFs, Verstappen was eager to do better in the street race in Monaco. Considering the nature of the track, overtaking was always going to be an uphill task. Not for a fearless Verstappen though. The youngster qualified in P4, and as soon as the lights went out, he chased down everything in front of him. First, he challenged Pastor Maldonado, diving down the inside of the Lotus driver, and after a few seconds of intense wheel-to-wheel racing, he emerged in front. As the race went on, the superiority of the cars showed and Max dropped to 13th, but he never stopped chasing. Soon he moved up to P12 and a few laps later, he followed Vettel bumper to bumper as they both passed Valtteri Bottas. His next target was Romain Grosjean. Verstappen first came within touching distance of Grosjean in lap 59. And as he's done all race, he made several attempts to pass, but the Lotus driver held his own until lap 64 when things went south. Going into turn 1, Verstappen tried to go through the inside of Grosjean and it looked like there was enough space to execute the move. However, the young Dutchman got his calculation wrong. He clipped the rear of Grosjean's car and went flying into the barriers at 30G. Consequently, the virtual safety car was deployed for the first time ever in Formula 1, and Verstappen was handed a 5-place grid penalty for his troubles. This affected his performance in the next race in Canada as he finished in P15 scoring 0 points. He made some improvements in the subsequent race in Russia to finish in P8. But Toro Rosso's technical problems were back in Britain as Verstappen suffered yet another DNF. Next up was the Hungarian Grand Prix, where another round of crazy occurrences was waiting to unfold. Driving in just his 10th Formula 1 race, Verstappen watched on as his more experienced colleagues made silly mistakes to force the safety car onto the track. Despite staying out of much of the trouble, Max Verstappen bagged a penalty for speeding behind the safety car and a slight brush with Valtteri Bottas. But as the race restarted, the young racer kept his cool as he made his way up the track, crossing the checkered flag in P4. It was the highest finish of his career, but it was a different kind of race from the teenage sensation. Rather than charging down the field aggressively, like he did in some of the first few races, Verstappen showed great maturity and versatility to emerge from a chaotic race unscathed. Expressing his thoughts on the race, Max said, "I didn't expect that at all after a bit of a bad start. However, I managed to stay out of trouble, and during my second stint, everything was going well. I felt comfortable in the car, and the guys behind me were not catching up." In the next event in Belgium, Verstappen was back to his usual aggressive mode. From qualifying in P15, he guided his STR10 up the field, passing several cars in the process. By the end of the race, he finished in 8th position. Analysts lauded the young Dutchman for another masterful performance, but the maneuver he pulled on Felipe Nasr dominated the headlines. Speeding at nearly 306 km per hour, Verstappen entered the Blanchimont corner side by side with Nasr, and he managed to create enough space to execute an inch-perfect overtake within the next 2 corners. It was a risky move, but the Dutch racer managed to stay within track limits to pull it off. Deservedly, the move was voted the best overtake of the 2015 F1 season, and it remains one of the best overtakes of Verstappen's career. The next race in Italy wasn't so good, as Verstappen could only finish in 12th place. However, he was back to his best in Singapore, going from P20 to P8. Verstappen put up a similar performance at the Japanese Grand Prix, going from the back of the grid to score 2 points. But before we tell you exactly how it happened, please like and subscribe to our channel to enjoy more exciting F1 content like this one. Following a 3-place grid penalty for parking on the racing line, Verstappen started the Japanese Grand Prix in P17. However, he quickly passed 4 drivers, including 2 world champions in Alonso and Button, to reach P13 by the end of lap 4. Consolidating on this great start, Verstappen pitted early and he came out blazing. He nailed his teammate Carlos Sainz at the chicane to go 9th. And despite the inefficiencies of his car, Verstappen was able to maintain that position until he crossed the line. He finished 10th in the next race in Russia. As we approached the business end of the season, he matched his highest result when he finished 4th in the US Grand Prix. He finished 9th in Mexico and Brazil before closing out his season with a 16th place finish in Abu Dhabi. But the Dutchman had earned himself enough credit throughout the season such that the disappointing end to the season didn't really affect his reputation. Overall, Verstappen completed 49 passes during the 2015 F1 season, and when the final points were tallied, he had 45 points, which placed him 12th on the driver's standings. On top of that, he won Rookie of the Year and Personality of the Year award. And deservedly, his brilliant overtake on Felipe Nasr at the Belgian Grand Prix was adjusted to be Action of the Year. These achievements marked a brilliant end to a crazy debut season for a kid who was deemed too young to compete. But more importantly, it set the stage for his transition to Red Bull, where he'd become a multiple world champion. What do you make of Verstappen's first season in F1? Do you think it's the craziest debut season ever? Let us know in the comments section below.